Hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to our Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. NOCD, an online platform for the treatment of OCD and related conditions like body-focused repetitive behaviors or tics. We also work with hoarding. We do work with trauma, anxiety disorders, and some mood concerns and issues too. If you're looking for help for OCD or these related conditions, go to nocd.com. That's NOCD.com. We also do one of my favorite things, our NOCD 411 sessions. If you're interested in some education about OCD, but maybe not quite ready for therapy, you can have an hour with one of us where we would be happy to talk to you and answer questions. Not a therapy session, but kind of like what we do here in the Q&A, but just you and just me or someone else. So that's always kind of fun. And today we have some guests that are joining us. So let me see who we have. First of all, Casey is here. Let's see. Casey is in. Tristan is here. Erica is here. Devin's here. And we have no squeaky noises or anything. Wow, this is great. No echoes, no squeaky noises. I think it's working for everyone. So wonderful, wonderful, as Lawrence Welk would say on his, I won't even say how ridiculous that show was. And if you're very young and you're like,
that's a deep cut.
Lawrence Welk, well, go YouTube it. You'll see just how entertaining things were for our parents and grandparents back in the 60s and so on. Let's take a moment to have everybody introduce themselves because, hey, it's Pride Month and we love to, on the first Wednesday of the month, celebrate whatever's being celebrated that month. So that's what we're doing today. So, Erica, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
My name is Erika Valek. I'm originally from Colombia, South America. I'm a licensed mental health clinician, licensed in the state of Massachusetts, Indiana, and New Hampshire. And I've been here at NOCD for a year and a half now.
Wonderful. Hi,
Happy
Tristan.
Pride.
Yeah. Tristan, you're muted, just so you know. So
yes, I am. My
that helps.
Want to connect. Hi, my name is Tristan Giordano. I am a licensed therapist. I've been with NOCD about 4 months now.
Wonderful. And Casey, who is also muted, will have to unmute and join us.
Hopefully you're not getting too much feedback. I couldn't.
No, we're good now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Casey Knight, a licensed clinical social worker located in Maine, and I've been with NOCD a little over a year.
Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, we are getting feedback from you now. Okay. So Casey, when you're not talking, stay muted. How about that? Because we hear some echo from you. And Devin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Devin Garza. I'm a licensed professional counselor based out of Arizona. I've been with NOCD for a little over 3 years, and in a previous life, I was a compulsive sex addiction therapist. And I've already seen some questions in the chat that I'm hoping we can bring a little bit of information. I know that's not our primary focus, but I know it's going to be relevant for today. Happy Pride, y'all.
We can bring info to everyone everywhere. So a couple of rules that I always do with these things. I'm happy just to be the scroller of the questions. If you see questions out there that you want us to jump to, just tell me the time and I will jump out to that question. And but before we get to that, why should we be concerned about OCD and LGBTQIA concerns? Plus concerns. What purpose would we have to talk about that? I know we do. I'm just setting you all up for the talk. Go ahead, please.
We need a hand-raising function. We're not used to all talking at the same time.
Usually, go ahead, Devin, you started.
We usually unmute. I'll go first because we are here and we matter and we're important and we're a really large part of the population. And there's also a really large part of obsessive compulsive disorder and different themes and presentations that overlap with sexuality and sexual behavior. And there's a really strong kind of correlation both directions. So folks who are part of the community with OCD, folks with OCD that relate to sexuality, and all of the Venn diagrams that overlap each other.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts on that?
Actually jumped in and did some math today looking at 4.5% of the population that identifies as LGBTQIA, 39% of that population having mental health diagnosis, kind of going down from there and really coming up with a statistic of 133,000 plus people who are queer then with OCD. So So that's a lot of folks out there who have OCD who are also queer. So we're here to identifying those folks, and we're here to help treat those folks, give them support.
Awesome. And people just ask that you speak up a little, Casey, so they can hear you a little bit better. So. And remember, mute when you're not speaking and we won't have the echo. Thank you. Tristan, Erica, anything you want to say?
I think it's important as a therapist to help normalize that we've been in that journey too. I also am diagnosed with OCD. I identify as gay and a lesbian, and I still consider myself a baby queer. So I think being able to give our members a space where they can be heard, we can normalize some challenges, not only in the queer community, but also with mental health, is important so that they don't feel alone.
Wonderful. Tristan, you want to throw anything into there to wrap it up?
I would agree with all of that. They're all very well spoken. And I think a lot of times members of the community, myself included, it's really difficult for us to reach out and get help because there's so much stigma just in being out and authentic in who you are.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it because these are such fun weeks for me when we get to celebrate things. I love the celebratory nature of the whole experience. So it's great. So like I said, if there's any areas that you all want to jump to, if there's a question as you look through the scroll there on the right that you think, hey, I want to answer that one, or can we go to that one? Please go right ahead and tell me which one you want to go to, and I will get it on the screen and we will chat about it. And FYI, I usually read it as well because sometimes we have people who listen but cannot see. So I like to read the questions so everybody can understand what we're talking about.
Before we get into questions, I wanted to say something on behalf of myself, and I'm assuming the other guests here, is we might use certain language interchangeably and use different terms and things like that. And so I think I've gotten the sense we're mostly going to just use the word queer as the language for all of the different things that can encompass. And so I invite the people listening to this to use their own translation and interpretation if they prefer different vocabulary or would like to apply it differently, to please take the licenses and the liberties that you wish to in order to find it to apply for you or to not apply in that way. But just for the ease of communication and for that sake, I will be planning to use the language of queer. I will often use gendered language, but we also want to make sure we incorporate gender nonconforming and just every different flavor that can live underneath this beautiful rainbow umbrella.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, with that, any particular ones you want to jump to? Otherwise, I usually start at the top. But if you have any that are hanging out there for you that like, I really want to talk about that one, let me know, and we will go.
I would like to respond to Lost at 4:49, and my times might be different than yours.
There we go. Lost says, why is it that more you don't want to see something is the more you see it? You see what you don't want to see, you hear what you don't want to hear, you dream what you don't want to dream.
I wonder, McGrath, if you would like to use your Toyota analogy here.
Yes. The day you buy a Toyota Corolla, that's all you see on the road is Toyota Corollas. No one is driving any other car but a Toyota Corolla. And if you buy a different car, you will find that car as well. So it just, we notice things in certain ways. Like if I look at the clock and it's not my birthday, I don't really care what time it is. But if it is my birthday on the clock, I'm like, oh my gosh, look, it's my, and then I think, man, that happens all the time. But you know what else happens all the time? All the other times that I look at the clock, that's not my birthday, also happen all of the time. I just happen to be kind of tuned into one time since it's my birthday that shows up on the clock.
I would chime in about, especially making it relevant to our topic for today, my answer to Lost will, if you've heard before the pink elephant effect or the white bear effect, the concept of the more you try not to think about something, most of us have some version of this in our space in some way, shape, or form. The concept of the more you try not to engage with something, the more likely you are to engage it. And the language I will often use and ask people to consider is, if you're really trying not to think about something, you're at least at minimum having to tell yourself, what am I supposed to not be thinking about again? Oh yeah, that's right, the pink elephant. What am I not supposed to be thinking about again? Oh yeah, that's right, this one thing. So just really affirming that in the attempt to ignore or divert or push something away, at minimum, you're having to check in to remind yourself what you're not supposed to be engaging or what you're supposed to be forgetting or not be activating. And especially within the context of sexuality and sexual orientation-based themes, but this is true for all of the themes. If we're looking for information and data that confirms or disconfirms something, we are constantly scanning and on the lookout for, what is this piece of data and how do I feel about it? Or does this affirm or disagree with a belief system that I have or a theory that I'm working with? And that is just a ton of effort for your brain to be going through. And so to address the dream question, because your brain's trying to make sense of stuff that you've been overloading with it throughout the day, and it's trying to make sense of something that may or may not be sensical.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add on to it. I think when I work with members, I help them understand that the more power and attention we give to something, even if we're not trying to have that, the more it grows. There's a YouTube video, a cartoon called The Samurai and the Fly. The samurai is trying to meditate, and as soon as the fly gets in his face, that is all that they are focused on trying to get rid of. So we try to help our members learn to kind of create distance between those thoughts, the intrusive images, the urges that is unwanted. And in doing that, we are not giving so much power and attention.
Yeah. We're also so highly suggestible, right? I've done this example so many times, but once I start talking about lice to people and how lice live in your hair and they crawl around and everyone wants to scratch their head now just after I said the word lice. You're like, but you couldn't have a better recipe for thinking of something than by trying not to think of the thing. I mean, that's just the way the brain works, is exactly that way, right? And if you think about, if you have a song stuck in your head, the best way to get rid of the song is not to try not to think of it. It's actually to go and listen to that song about 30 or 40 times until you're just bored with it. And then it will fall out of your head typically. So be wary there about wanting something to go away. That it just makes it seem like, ooh, the forbidden fruit. That looks fun. I'm going to focus on that a little more.
I think this leads really well into the comment at 706.
706.
And I think, something here to consider is that, do you want to go ahead and read it?
Is it that one? Definitely that one? Definitely scrupulosity, homophobia, and social anxiety, developmental trauma.
Is Baden 706? Could you please talk about hypersexuality?
Oh, okay. Oh, we are on different time zones. That's right.
Sorry about the time zone thing.
No. There it is. 606 at 9. There you go. Could you please talk about hypersexuality, sex addiction in the OCD community? How prevalent is it, and when should someone consider if they are too much into sexual activities?
So what I was going to offer here is that it's that same sort of thing if you're thinking about it, right? If you're thinking about it a lot, I'm thinking that maybe it's not that you're into too many sexual activities. Maybe it's OCD and that it's not actually sex addiction. If you're thinking about it a lot, it might be an OCD thing.
Could be.
If you're worried about it.
I will echo the language of worry about it. What is the worry about it? What is the fear behind it? And I know I kind of I saw this question before the feed started, and I'm really appreciative Casey brought it up. you can have both. You can have OCD. You can also have compulsive, excessive sexual behavior. They can overlap with each other. Sometimes our sexual behavior is in an attempt to resolve and figure out what we're into, and are we attracted to something that we don't want to be attracted to, or what is the meaning if the certainty and the requirement is to come to a confirmation about one's identity or orientation or chosen wanted behavior. That can be a process involved in behavior and identity kind of overlapping with each other and wiggling through. So a lot of times what I will recommend people is, I don't think there's a yes or no answer to this. It really is going to be a matter of starting somewhere, starting either with a OCD informed therapist and being able to explore what in addition beyond it might be compulsivity in an addictive type of manner, or starting with a sexual focused therapist and having them be able to identify, hey, there's a lot more going on here that fits the OCD cycle, and we're going to recommend that you identify that. The big concern I have there's a lot of misinformed therapists out there that don't necessarily capture and diagnose OCD properly at the beginning. So a lot of times that's a caution. I'm just going to say, if you're on the OCD YouTube listening to what we have to say, start on the OCD side, and we can recommend moving to something else if it's not that kind of process of elimination ruling out.
I always suggest to people to be wary of how they use language too, because for a long time it was compulsive sexual behavior, which then sounds like it's a compulsion, which then must be obsessive compulsive disorder if it is. So I talk about sexual behavior, maybe sexual addiction, those types of things. But I'm kind of a purist on language of this. So I try to keep the word compulsion out of anything but obsessive compulsive disorder, because for me, I identify a compulsion is designed to neutralize an obsession. And that is how I approach it. I'm not saying everybody else has to. I'm just saying that's how I do it, to kind of help with the language and the discussions that I'm involved in this area. Cool.
Can we answer the question at 31?
31.
TC 103.
Yes. Thank you. I have a few 31s, so let me jump to that one. TC 103. All my 31s here. Oh my, just so many.
At the very top for me.
It's the very top for you. Okay. There it is. How can you tell if avoidance is something you're doing as a compulsion versus something you're doing because you're in denial? Great question. Mm-hmm.
Can I first just appreciate the thumbnail that comes with this question? Oh my gosh, TC103. I'm loving this thumbnail. It is Aubrey Plaza holding a butcher knife. I'm in love with this picture. I am talking a lot, so I'm going to pass and come back to me.
Oh, you picked it. You get to go. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good question. My very annoying answer is, I don't know. Let's get some more information. So when avoidance is done as a compulsion, really to Dr. McGrath's point just now, if compulsion is done in response to neutralize an obsession, it can help to put it through the OCD cycle. What is the obsession? What is the anxiety that's being brought about by that, or the distress? What is the compulsion attempting to do, and what would the compulsion be, in this case avoidance, and then does that bring up relief and keep the cycle going? I think I would need a little bit more conversation about what does it mean to be doing something in denial. I use a frustrating example. My members will tell you I say this one a lot. I'm not avoiding flinging myself off of my roof and breaking my leg. I'm not avoiding jumping off of my roof and hurting myself. I'm choosing not to jump off of my roof and break my leg. I have no need to do that. There's no reasonable purpose for me to do such a thing. If I am not coming down off of the roof when it's time for me to come down because I am afraid of breaking my leg, we're probably in a little bit more compulsive avoidance of I'm afraid of this outcome. So I want to get myself prepared to come down off of the roof because eventually I need to come inside and go to the bathroom and eat some dinner and things like that. So when we think about the concept of denial, are we just not doing that because we deny? Being able to break it down to what is the intrusive thought, what is the fear, what compulsion would be being done in response to that, finding the OCD cycle, and if it's not fitting into that well, being able to evaluate what other processes might be being at play. What does it mean to be in denial about something?
Anyone else want to throw in on that? I'll say for me, in the end, I don't know that I care as much because I'm probably going to do ERP for both of those reasons, right? The treatment that I'm going to do, if this is interfering in your life, is going to be helping to expose you to things and teaching you not to do your typical safety behaviors. To me, there's 5 safety behaviors that I work with: avoidance, reassurance seeking, distraction, substance use, and compulsions. And if you're doing one of those 5 safety seeking behaviors as a way to get through life, and it's interfering in your ability to function in some way, I want to help you face those things and learn to do those things without relying on the safety behaviors as the way to manage your emotional experience with those things. If you do that, I think you can survive anything. Right? But once you attribute that everything's okay because of a safety behavior, then we're in trouble. Because then we know what's going to happen. The safety behavior occurrence is going to increase and increase and increase instead of decrease. Right? We don't see compulsions in OCD be successful, and then people say, oh, now I can do less of that. Right? That's not the way that it works. Right? So. Any other ones that anyone wants to jump into? Oh, here's one. Here, I'm going to pick one for all of you. With relationship OCD and being queer, how can I work through the intense feelings of my first queer relationship and the breakup while also distinguishing the feeling of OCD? What does our panel think of that? All right, I'm going to call people. Here, Tristan, go for it.
I would say that would depend on what the specific presentation of your OCD looks like. So if you have relationship obsessions related to retroactive jealousy, where you have a hard time processing your partner's past or accepting that they have a past prior to your relationship, or it's related to cheating and you're worried that every person you ever are dating is going to be unfaithful. So the purpose of ERP and treating OCD is not for us to not feel our feelings. Feelings are productive. They have a purpose. We're supposed to feel them. That's why they're there. But OCD makes things seem a lot bigger than they need to be, even when there's no evidence that we need to be worried about something. So our goal with ERP is not to tell you not to feel the feelings of your breakup, but to be able to distance yourself from the intrusive thoughts and separate that from your identity so that you can sort through what you actually feel about the breakup, as opposed to what does OCD tell you you should feel about it.
Erica, what do you want to throw into that?
I think with this one, we use a lot of the anxiety wave, writing out the wave with our younger members, but I also include that even with our adults, because it is important to help members begin to experience their feelings and allow themselves to know that they can ride out the wave. When we allow ourselves to feel the sadness, the sense of overwhelming, it usually comes down on its own without us trying to do any compulsion. And so if we can help create a space for the member to feel that and then remain in the present rather than getting stuck in the two extremes of either thinking about what went wrong in that relationship or how they could have fixed it, or worrying about something that could happen again in the future, but really being present, they can learn to live a values-based life rather than a fear-based life because of that relationship experience. So my job is to normalize, yes, feel, ride out the wave, and practice staying in the here and now, because the here and now is where the uncertainty and the discomfort is. And the more that you allow yourself to do that, the more you're able to tolerate that without that threat.
Sure. But Casey, this is their first relationship of this type, and now it's a breakup. Won't this destroy for the rest of their lives, or can we all survive and move on and figure out a way to function?
Maybe not.
Excellent answer. Yeah. Right. Everybody wants that absolute answer, right? And Devin, why don't we give absolute answers to people?
I can't find them. Give me an absolute answer and I'm quitting this job immediately. I'm getting a magic wand. I'm getting my crystal ball. Screw ERP. I'm going to go be the new Miss Cleo. I'm going to find a way to be able to give people the certainty that they're looking for. I haven't been able to find it in my many years on this planet so far. As soon as you find it, call me up. Let me know. I need the secret sauce.
So we've done a few questions, but with all of you here tonight and for our Pride Month, what are ways that you see OCD and LGBTQIA plus concerns kind of melding in, meshing, bouncing off of, fighting with each other? I mean, obviously at least on the OCD side, I'm very proud of the OCD world to have recognized that this is not HOCD and that we've moved away from that terrible term, that as if it was only straight people who would be afraid to be gay, and that'd be the worst thing in the world for anybody to have, and but it's fine for everybody else. No, it doesn't matter your orientation, right? OCD is doubt and everything. So I'm proud of the OCD community for making that realization and really putting out there that let's correct a wrong and an injustice that we have had. But for all of you with the lived experiences that you have, be that on the LGBTQIA plus side or on the OCD side, what have you seen, noticed? What do you want people to know who are listening tonight? And maybe there are people like Louisa, they're having their first relationship, they've just come out, or they've just discovered they have OCD, and all of these things, or maybe OCD is just starting to now attack orientation and everything. This is your platform. Give some sage wisdom to our listeners, please.
For me and my own journey, I know that there's been a lot of doubts and fear getting to where I am. A proud member of the LGBTQ community, being able to talk about it in my job is something I've never been able to do. And I think being part of NOCD has helped me just accept that doubt and questioning are going to be part of everyone's journey. It isn't just exclusive to the LGBTQ community, or it isn't just if you have any mental health challenges. No, it is just part of a human. And when we begin to work on accepting that it isn't because of who we are or what we experience, I think the pressure kind of seems to remove a little bit. And so just normalizing that doubt is going to be part of everyone's journey, and that questioning in many areas of your life is what you're going to experience. Then it prevents you from trying to then find that answer or that goal. You're just, again, going back, I can't preach it enough, but being in the here and now, holding space for the not knowing is what I think I've noticed it most in both OCD community and being part of the LGBT community.
I think this is a really beautiful question. I think so often people who are in the queer community are really searching for a therapist who can be validating, who might be WPATH trained if they're transgender, who might be queer identified if they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, somebody who looks like them, right, or has the same identities as them. But I think when we're dealing with OCD, it's more important actually that we have a therapist who is trained in ERP and who is trained in any of the OCD therapies and OCD knowledgeable, more than that they are just identified as queer and as queer affirming. Because if we miss the diagnosis and we are, if you're somebody who is gay and you are feeling that maybe you're questioning that, it can be seen maybe just, I'm not using my words in a really great way, but you might feel like maybe I'm not gay and I'm lying to somebody. And then somebody can come in as a therapist and really kind of use that in a different way. So I think if you have a therapist who knows about OCD, that is the more important piece, specifically with this diagnosis.
From my personal lived experience and anecdotally, there's a really strong connection between the doubt that we've been talking about and the concept of sexual orientation, gender identity being a process, and there being an exploration phase. And we tend to think of it as like developmentally appropriate, that throughout certain ages of childhood to adolescence to young adult and throughout, we tend to think of it societally as a thing that people figured out when they're young and then come to a conclusion and then live their way that way. And I think there's also a really important generational shift that has been occurring for some time, but it is especially true for everyone here on this planet right now that maybe was not true in Lawrence Welk's time. But being able to see that process, and the language of OCD is so certain, it is so doubt aversive, it is so, I need to know this thing, I need to nail it down, I need to know for sure, and it needs to get locked in and never changed. So we're really trying to chisel it into granite and confirm it to be true forever. And that tends to not be a typical process. Not that doesn't exist for some folk, but that goes contrary to a typical experience of people exploring their identity and exploring their chosen behaviors and how they want to incorporate that and have it happen internally, and then also how they are beheld externally, socially. So being able to really affirm just one of the cues can be queer, it can also be questioning. And I think there's a lot of implication that you ought to be able to break it down and figure it out and know it and lock it into stone. And if you are unsure about it, is it because you are questioning? Is it because you are queer and in denial? Is it because you're straight and in denial? We absolutely have this happen in other directions. Or is it because this is where you are on your developmental journey? And so one of the primary goals for sexual orientation and gender identity related themes is going to be, I don't need to know beyond the shadow of a doubt the answer to that question, but for this moment in time, this is the identity that I'm comfortable with. This is the label, if I choose to label myself, that I am accepting and incorporating. And this is how I'm still just going to get on and carry on with my life and my activities. And that doesn't really get represented in any other theme quite the way that it does in sexual related themes.
I would really agree with that. And I think one of the things that's important to note, especially with some of the comments we've gotten about current things going on in the world and how divisive things have been and how scary it can be to be a member of the LGBTQ community right now. In saying that we're all different, we're all also very similar. And OCD doesn't show up a certain way just because you're queer or just because you're straight or you're trans or you are cisgendered. It has nothing to do with any of those things. It has to do with who you are as a person, your identity, your values. OCD attacks those things. It attacks what you care about. So if you're queer, your sexual orientation OCD might show up as, oh my gosh, what if I'm actually straight and I've been lying to everybody? Or if you're straight, it might show up like, I've been married to the same person for 30 years, but now I'm thinking about this same-sex coworker that I've been working with for the last 10 years at my job. So in all of the division and the importance in us recognizing the nuance of different identities and the different communities, I think it's also important for us to recognize that we all experience things very similarly, and it's important for us to be able to connect in that way as well.
I saw a quote the other day that labels are meant to be descriptive, not prescriptive, and I thought that was really powerful in if I identify as gay, I must behave in this very specific way for the rest of my life, and I have to do everything that fits in this way. And if I deviate from it, that's going to be problematic for me and for the people around me. And it becomes very pigeonholed and very forced. And I'm hoping we'll come to this later, but I want to introduce the concept of all forms of different bigotry and phobia and hatred and things like that, but specifically speaking to bi erasure and being able to find how that will often play for folks who are questioning if they are bisexual versus more of we tend to think the very binary kind of spectrum of gay or straight or lesbian, gay, straight. There's a lot of societal messages around, oh, you're bi, that's cute, you just haven't found the person of the opposite gender to work for you, or oh, you're doing this for attention, or there's so much stigmatized language and perspective around it that I tend to see that most often in orientation based OCD presentations is the fear of the additional stigma, not just that this will be a way that I am meant to behave that I don't want to, but really the core issue of what it means for me and what people will perceive me as and how this is going to impact the rest of my life. There's really heavy weight associated with that, and I tend to see it in that way.
There is a quote that I really, really love, and I honestly can't remember who said it, so you'll have to forgive me, but it has gained a lot of popularity in Pride Month in particular. Nature doesn't do binaries, only spectrums.
I like that.
And it's a 3-dimensional cube that we're talking about. It's messy and muddy. We're complicated.
I like this one. When riding the wave of anxieties, there's something I can be telling myself while trying to understand what I'm feeling. I've tried doing that 2 nights ago, and I had a panic attack, and it made it worse. I'll start off with, here's the interesting thing. Many people come into therapy thinking there must be something that I'm missing, that I'm not telling myself, that I'm not doing, that I need this kind of intervention. And I think this comes from the idea that we have in TVs and movies about psychology, right? Where you're always given something to do. And this might be one of the more difficult things about exposure and response prevention. Instead of giving you something to do, we're often asking you to not do something, which is the compulsion, the thing that you've been relying on as the way to ride the wave. And now what we want you to learn is you can ride the wave, you can feel anxious, and you don't have to do anything about that, right? I would ask you, when you were learning to ride a bicycle, were you doing diaphragmatic breathing, muscle relaxation, and closed eye visualizations of where you wanted to be in the world? No. You were a little kid and you were just on a big wheel and then a tricycle and then a bike with training wheels and then a parent likely holding you on the back and then eventually letting you go, and you fell. And it was probably uncomfortable. And then they got you back up and you did it again. And then you did it again. And then you did it again. And you kept doing it until you got the hang of it. We didn't introduce anything into that experience for you to do about it other than repetition is going to be the thing that is going to help you to learn how to handle this experience. So I like people to think about that and think of all the things that you've done in your entire life up to this point that you didn't have something else there to help you through it, right? I mean, unless you rode your bicycle with your security blanket or your pacifier, even though you were 12 or whatever, if you attribute that everything is okay because of this thing, it's interesting. And I'll just say one thing and I'll turn it over to you. But one of my favorite videos that I ever watched was, I think it was Watson. This is way back in the early psychology, in the early 20s, 30s, 40s kind of thing. And there was a young girl who would not walk unless she was holding hands with someone. And the moment she let go of somebody's hand, she fell to the ground. Now, she wasn't using the hand she was holding to balance whatsoever, but there was just something psychological about it. So Watson did this thing where he got a rope and he put the rope in his hand and her hand. And they walked together holding the rope. And then he made the space longer and longer. And then he let go of the rope. And if she was holding the rope, she would walk. But if she let go of the rope, she would fall down. And then he cut the rope and cut it and cut it, cut it. And then it was just a tiny little string. And eventually that just faded away and she just continued walking. Notice we didn't add things as the rope got smaller and smaller to that. We took things away from the experience until the masterfulness was there. So anyway, I'll turn it over to all of you. That was a very long-winded answer. I apologize.
I'm glad you gave the example of whittling it down, because I think that's something people have a lot of fear of about doing ERP. And especially I've seen a couple questions in the chat about, am I going to have to do sexual exposures? Like, what is this going to look like? What are we going to do? And I'm going to clarify that's a conversation for you and your therapist to build a hierarchy that works for your values and actually targets the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. A lot of times people are afraid that they're going to have to do a lot of really excessive and challenging and hard to accomplish goals. And a lot of times we're talking about you doing the thing that you want to be doing, and it's just making it a little bit more attainable, step by step, inch by inch, in order to build your confidence and your competence. As a side note, ERP is the only therapy I've ever implemented as a therapist that builds confidence as you go without me just saying, be more confident and trying to convince you to do this. I think there's beautiful opportunity for just becoming a much more competent human being while doing this work. If I can, the thing I would say to Nettie is, at most I'm saying, this is hard, I'm going to keep going. This is hard, I'm going to keep going. I am a big fan of cheerleading language. Dr. McGrath might disagree with me. I want us to pump ourselves up to do the thing that we're doing. When I'm riding this wave, this is really hard, I would like to stop, I'm going to keep going, go me. And then I make all of my members dance with me. We do big dancing and pats and making sure we're positively reinforcing, because it is really hard.
I think with this one, what I try to help members realize is not about trying to get rid of anxiety. It's about teaching our brain and rewiring it to accept that there are going to be times that suddenly we feel anxious. And most of us, when we notice anxiety symptoms, we start to see the increase in heart rate, the tightness of the chest, the upset stomach, things that make our brain say danger, 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 which is why we go into this problem-solving mode of trying to figure out why I'm feeling anxious. So I like to normalize. There are many times when your heart rate increases that your brain does not freak out. And we bring awareness to that. When are those times? Exercise is one of them. So in the moment when suddenly you are experiencing the intense anxiety, what I like to do, what Nathan Peterson does in his YouTube videos all the time, is literally, yep, this stinks. This anxiety may or may not go away, but I'm learning to just accept and tolerate that. I know for people, they get caught up in, oh my gosh, is this going to lead to something else? Does it mean that I have something else, right? And that in itself, that mental rumination, the getting stuck in the future, that becomes the compulsion. So when we help people identify what they are doing when they are trying to ride out the wave, we do bring awareness that sometimes they're still doing compulsions. And our job is just to feel that anxiety, to acknowledge it's there, and then to continue to do whatever you were doing, whether it was working, whether it was sleeping, whether it was engaging with friends, really not giving it so much power and attention that takes you away from the present. So I think for Nettie is, when you're trying to understand something, you could be potentially falling into the pattern of trying to figure something out, which is the rumination, which becomes a compulsion. So approach it differently, like, oh, there goes my anxiety again. Yep, came out of nowhere. May mean that something's wrong, but I'm not going to worry about it or try to figure it out. I might not like the way my stomach feels or my chest feels, but I'm learning to do hard things, essentially.
I want to add too that, so much of the compulsion and so much of OCD is that perfectionism part and that checking, right? And we're checking to see, are we doing it perfectly? And we're practicing. Nobody ever said perfect practice. It's practice. And so we want to make sure that we're just practicing. It's not perfect practice makes perfect. It's just practice. So make sure that you're practicing and practice wrong. make sure you're practicing wrong. Maybe even try to practice wrong. I have people try to practice wrong all the time, mess it up intentionally, do it wrong, but do it.
One thing I would definitely add to that is, in addition to getting caught in like this ruminating trap, or I have to do this perfectly or it's not going to work, is a lot of times we are so focused on the anxiety and the discomfort and the distress that we feel as a result of our obsessions, and we're seeking that relief. But then over time, when we've been struggling with OCD, we start beating ourselves up because, well, I gave into my compulsion again. Why can't I just stop? Why can't I just not do this thing anymore? This isn't even real. I'm getting so worked up over nothing. And shame and guilt will feed the OCD cycle just as well as our compulsions do. So it's really important when we're trying to understand what we're feeling that we're not, why are you like this? Can't you just be normal? Normal is relative. None of us are normal, and that's okay. Normal is boring.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know what normal is, honestly.
Me either.
Casey says she's okay. Congratulations. Casey's,
teach us your ways.
Yeah, you figured it out. Mm-hmm.
Dr. McGrath, could we get, on my time it's 5:21, I think it's 7:21 yours, Nolan's first message?
Yes. What is a normal amount of control a healthy person should, bad word, have, there's no such thing as bad words, but I'm not a fan of the word should, have over their sexual thoughts and feelings? Should they be able to practice celibacy if they want to without much difficulty, or is that unrealistic?
What I would start with first is go an old school CBT, if you remember the thoughts, feelings, behaviors triangle, and we break it down into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. I would like to very gently, and I hope you don't receive this as critical, Nolan, but he said, how much control should we have over our thoughts? Should we behave a certain way? And so I might even just have a step back a little bit and slow down. What are our thoughts? What are our feelings? And what are our behaviors? Because practicing celibacy would be a behavior in my very black and white CBT kind of triangle. But then being able to explore, okay, the practice of celibacy, if we're not engaging in sexual behavior, how does that then influence the thoughts and the feelings and the behavior, and the thoughts and the feelings and the behavior? And so being able to take that concept and applying it, if there's OCD involved on board, which being able to explore what about it is compulsive, what is obsessive, what is wanted, what's unwanted. I think that there's a lot of just rightness in the way that this question was worded, and being able to look through the nuance of what does it mean to think a thing, what does it mean to feel a thing, and what does it mean to behave a thing, and being aware of how those might be conflated. I would assume that those three things are combined in an unhelpful way in this sentence, and so being able to pull them apart and then applying really effective ERP to the unwanted compulsive behavior, but that might need to get sussed out first.
In terms of the ability to practice celibacy if they want to without much difficulty, I know people who are in the priesthood who talk about how difficult it is to be celibate, and this is their chosen way of life. So I'm just wondering, are we setting up for ourselves, if we're saying, I want to be able to do something without a lot of difficulty, are we setting ourselves up for failure? Because if something does feel difficult or tough to do, does it mean that there's something wrong with us? No, lots of things that we do are difficult to do. I was married. That was not easy, right? Especially once my wife got terminally ill. It was really not easy. It was, in fact, it was pretty darn horrible. Did I do it wrong because I wasn't practicing marriage and it wasn't easy? Or do things just come and they feel the way they feel, and we learn how to handle it, right? And that's sometimes being celibate is really simple, and you think, good gosh, I'm so glad I'm not with anybody. And other times we might be lonely and think, boy, it'd really be nice to be with someone. And that could all happen within a month of each other, right? I mean, so I'm just wary of wanting to say that I should be able to do something without a lot of difficulty, that we set ourselves up then for failure. Were there any other ones that we... We got about 9 minutes left. So just want to make sure that if anyone else has one they wanted to jump to.
There are a couple questions about how to separate your OCD from your identity.
Okay.
How do we figure out where OCD ends and where I begin?
Great question. What do you guys think about that?
I always explain it to our members that our OCD is part of us, it's not all of us, and it exists in a different part of our brain than our logical thinking brain. And so it is going to send us doubts and fears about a lot of things. And so once we begin to just normalize that, when I have a doubt and a fear, it's a possibility that it could be OCD, but rather than trying to figure out, is it my OCD, is it me, just accept it could be, right? So learning to accept not knowing is huge with ERP, and is, I think, one of the most difficult things for a lot of people. And from someone who I identify as a perfectionist in recovery, because one of my subtypes with OCD is perfectionist and just right, of course you would want to have some idea of where is OCD and where is my identity. But again, that is binary. There isn't a clear line. Sometimes it can overlap. And we are learning to accept. Acceptance, we borrow a lot from acceptance and commitment therapy with ERP, because it is so important to just be kind, to be in this journey knowing that we are going to make mistakes, that we are going to fall into patterns of wanting to have certainty. And when it feels urgent, most of the time is our OCD. So some of the exercises that I'm sure all of us as therapists do in our sessions is really explore values. Because when you explore your values, you're able to more times than not separate what's you and your values versus what OCDs make you want to live or how it wants you to live.
I think this question also melds well with it being Pride Month. What part of us is our queerness? You know, a lot of me and how I identify is my queerness. It's my culture, it's my family. It's a lot about who I am, as is my OCD, but it's not all of me, and it's not all of you. And I think you get to decide part of that. You get to be in charge of that to some extent, and you learn more and more about that with the research that you do, with the therapies that you do, and with the people that you identify with and that you consider yourself with. So you get to decide that.
Awesome. Any other ones that you all are interested in?
There's a couple of them about scrupulosity. I know for that, a lot of people don't even know what that word is. And I think with some of us in being queer, we've had to navigate the challenge of holding space for our faith and religion. So that might be one to bring up.
Yeah. So scrupulosity, OCD about morals or ethics or religion, often a fear of worst case scenarios. I've offended someone, I've harmed someone, I'm going to hell, I've wanted to have sex with a deity, I've done the unpardonable sin, I've violated a religious rule, which will then cause me to fall out of favor from a higher power, something of that nature, right? And depending on how fundamental you read various holy books, your lifestyle may be seen as one of sin versus one of wonderful, right? So that comes into the play as well. So yeah, there's a lot of interaction and intersection, right, between what our orientation is and where our faith comes into play and all of that. And since that can be a stressor, and OCD loves a stressor, OCD is going to grab right onto that right there. Mm-hmm. How has that affected your lives?
Well, for me personally, faith is and was and continue to be a a priority in my life. And so it took me, I would say, more than 12 years to be able to accept my identity. And I had a lot of shame and guilt for many years. And so, it took me marrying my wife almost 17 years before I felt like, okay, I'm no longer being rejected by God or my family, even though I still experience those things that are very real and present and hurtful at times with family. I think there is a lot of unknown when it comes to faith because of how I was brought up. And I've learned to accept who I am. I learned to accept that I have a God that loves me unconditionally. And when it gets cloudy and messy and my OCD sends me doubts, or even if just by nature, how I was raised brings me a lot of doubts, I'm reminded that I can hold space for not knowing without needing to find that answer. And that has tremendously impacted me, and I have benefited from just holding space for, maybe, right?
Awesome. Mm-hmm.
I think to Devin's earlier point about societal messages, particularly in the queer community, there is a lot of prejudice and bias that we become subject to just based on who we are as individuals. And sometimes for those of us who deal with OCD in daily life, especially scrupulosity themes, it almost reinforces that internal cycle for us that we are going to hell. What we're doing is an unforgivable sin simply for being who we are. So it can be really hard to separate what is within my values, what is actually important to me, what does my faith actually tell me, versus how is everyone interpreting these things, and what does that mean for my life and my identity and how I choose to move forward.
I like to describe OCD as a parasite that's trying to take things from you, and I can't think of a better IV drip of combining societal messages and stigma and belief systems, especially separating faith from the world in which you came up is usually very difficult for people. So really identifying there is a deep well to tap from, and OC will do it every single opportunity. And so working hard on creating that separation and that space and trying not to let those tendrils come together. And then when they do, pulling them apart. And this is a constant process, but just keep working on separating them, because that's the way you want to conduct and affirm for yourself.
Casey, any last words on that? Yeah. No, you're good. Awesome. Well, what an hour. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate it. And thank all of you for listening to the always fun and exciting Wednesday night webinar that we do here at NOCD. If you're looking for help for OCD related conditions, check us out at nocd.com. That's nocd.com. We work in Canada, the UK, Australia, and the good old US of A, and we do take insurance too. So nocd.com. We're happy to have you. Next week, we'll be back again, and more fun and excitement with answering your questions. Till then, everyone, please be nice to yourself and each other. It's just a much better world when we do that. Thank you.